How's it going, everybody? This is Dave Meltzer. We're going to be here for 2 hours talking pro wrestling. We've got Brian Alvarez already on the line. We're going to have Cody Monk of the Dallas Morning News up in about a half an hour. This is going to be a big show because we are going to start the show. And for those of you who did not see the Vince McMahon interview on Bob Costas, we're going to play the wrestling portion of it in just a minute. We were deluged with emails. A lot of them are up on the site. Very divergent viewpoints. Now, Brian and I have not actually seen the show. I'll actually have a tape of it tomorrow morning. So on tomorrow's show, I'll be able to discuss it, the show as far as the television viewpoint. I have a feeling, and I could be wrong, that listening to it may be different from seeing it because of all of the different things about eyes and inflections and intimidations and pointing fingers and stuff that people were writing about. So maybe this is a better chance to actually listen to it point by point and let the points, whatever points are made or not made, speak for themselves as opposed to who looked good or who was sweating or something like that. So anyway,
Dave, just to jump in real quick, I did watch it last night, as I was recording it, and there are certain instances where Vince kind of, and you can kind of get it from listening to it, there are certain instances where Vince kind of leans over and is very, angry at Bob, and you can hear it in his voice, and it almost looks as though at one point when you see the tape, you'll see it. Costas kind of leans forward towards him and then kind of leisurely backs up a little bit as if to say, oh, my God, this guy might actually come across and crack me one. So, there are certain instances where Vince looks like he's gonna do that. But you can get the gist of it from listening to it. But when you see it, it's even better.
The one thing, and we'll probably talk more about we're not going to air the XFL stuff, but if you want to talk about it, if you've seen the show, you want to give your opinion, that'll probably be the main topic of conversation today. Before we start, I do want to say, because we may never get back to this, is that I thought that the Cruiserweight match last night on Thunder was a tremendous match. So I just want to get that out of the way in case we never talk about Thunder for the rest of the show.
And it was all downhill from there.
Yeah, it was. But anyway, just trying to think if there's any other thing I want to say. The one thing, when this was all said and done is, I sort of had a feeling, this is a couple years ago, the Mushnick thing that we talked about a few weeks ago on the show, on Fox Sports Net, that whole story about, when they were supposed to be on the show together and what happened.
Yeah.
And I sort of thought I knew. And now I'm sure I knew why. It happened the way it did. And that's basically, I think that Vince was looking to punch the guy, and since he wasn't there live, he had no intention of debating him without attempting to intimidate him.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously. So, and I think that this may have, Costas was the surrogate, but everyone knew that, there's nothing he's going to do to Costas for real because, it's not like there's no long-established feud between Bob Costas and Vince McMahon. Although he may try to create one out of this, who knows? Anyway, we'll air the thing right now, and we'll come back and we'll talk about it right after this.
Let's take a look at some of that WWF entertainment. This is from this past week on one of the WWF telecasts that aired on CNN. You know what? Phil Mushnick did write that I should do this in the New York Post, but I was planning to do this before he wrote it.
Yeah, I'm sure you were, Bob.
Roll it.
I'm sure.
That's the truth.
No idea how far I would degrade myself for the right cause. I would do anything for you, Mr. McMahon.
Get on your hands and knees like a dog. That's it.
Personally, I love
that's it. Women. Crawl around like a dog. You want to prove your loyalty to me, right? Now take your blouse off, Trish. Come on. Take it off now.
What kind of man is this? He's my hero. I came to Washington, D.C., and I'm going to get to see Bush.
I'm wondering what color panties you're wearing tonight, Trish. You're sorry. Take your bra off and take it off now.
Oh, yeah. Oh, come on. Oh, yeah.
Damn it, I said take it off, Trish.
She's going to do it.
Now, I should point out that, in fact, she did not remove her bra. You removed your sports jacket and draped it over her because perhaps we wouldn't want to do anything that would be
because I'm the consummate gentleman, right? No, I would never want to do anything in bad taste.
What's the possible justification for what we just saw?
It's part of a storyline. What you see is a soap opera, okay? Now you take me out of the XFL world, okay? Now let's take Vince. Let's find not, some of the other material which you could present, from World Wrestling Federation Entertainment. Let's find the most salacious, out-of-character kind of thing you can possibly put. Let's edit it and put it right up here.
Not every moment is like that, but enough moments are like that for it to be fairly typical. Crotch grabbing, people grabbing their crotches, pointing in that direction, and saying, suck it. 11 and 12-year-old kids in the audience
Bob,
emulating that behavior.
Hang on a second. Don't make me raise my voice here. I don't want to do that with you, okay? Even though you're doing it with me. If you want to play that way, boy, I can play, okay? But when you get in a situation that you don't know what you're talking about because you don't watch, okay? You're no different than the Phil Mushnick, who's some sort of moralist out there, who writes about stuff, and he doesn't watch either, okay? And then when someone reads something that, someone else writes...
These things don't happen? They haven't happened?
You want to let me finish here for a second, pal?
I'm asking you the question.
Then shut your mouth and let me answer the question, all right? I'll be happy to answer.
Go ahead and answer.
Good. So you got a situation where you don't watch. We haven't done crotch grabbing. We haven't done that in over a year. We haven't done the suck it chant, as you talk about, in about a year and a half.
But
there,
you did
Bob.
it.
Oh, at one time, it was part of the show. Absolutely.
You did it.
Yeah, and you know what? This show that you're on right now, what precedes this show?
The Sopranos in this particular case.
Amen. How many times do you hear the fuck word in The Sopranos? I happen to like the show, okay? It's a soap opera, right? All right? That's what we do in the entertainment world. We're a soap opera, Bob. Come on. And if you've ever watched soap opera, even on daytime television, compare that with also HBO. I love HBO, but prior to Sopranos, Sex and the City's on. How many orgasms were they? Okay,
your stuff is geared in large part toward youngsters.
My stuff,
toward young boys and young men.
Demographic. Okay, a very broad demographic. And
it's not on a pay service like HBO. It's on basic cable.
Right. Okay.
Basic cable, not a pay service like HBO.
Difference.
It is a significant difference.
No, I don't think so.
People have said to me, I'd like to watch your show, but we don't have HBO in our home because we don't want our kids channel surfing past it and to see stuff that isn't appropriate for them.
On your channel surfing, go click. Anyone who doesn't want to watch World Wrestling Federation Entertainment just turns it off. How easy is that?
No one's being forced to watch it. The question is,
if you're not being forced to watch it and people enjoy it, then why are you on your high seat here, your high chair, with people who enjoy it? As a matter of fact, research will indicate that more families. You want to talk about the family hour type situation?
Go ahead.
Oh, this is going to knock your socks off. Okay?
All right.
You ready for this one?
I'm ready.
Okay. In a situation where a television show brings the family together, meaning more than just one person watching TV, the most watched family-oriented program, entertainment-wise, not a sporting event because like the Super Bowl outdoes this and stuff like that, is SmackDown on Thursday night on UPN. Which, by the way, just for the record, we even bleeped the word ass in the first hour, not the second hour. Okay? So believe it or not, it's like there are some standards, there are some responsibilities that we accept depending upon the day part, depending about whether or not it is on cable, whether or not it's on broadcast, whether or not it's Saturday morning, Sunday morning. So we recognize what we're doing and who the audience is.
Just because there is an audience for something doesn't
Right.
justify it. There's an audience for pornography. There were audiences for minstrel shows.
That
doesn't mean that those things are justifiable.
Do you know how many people enjoy on a global basis World Wrestling Federation Entertainment that aren't elitists like you?
You know what?
The guy on the street loves this stuff.
As you personally know, I was a wrestling fan for much of my life. I enjoyed the tongue-in-cheek type of soap opera that wrestling was, and it could still be that without the vulgarity, without the mean-spirited. Without the mean-spirited.
Listen, pal, you know what? You got your little show back here, and you get paid for doing your little show and bringing people out here and being some sort of highfalutin type guy. I'm down with that. That's cool because I love freedom of expression. This is great. Okay, I like this. At the same time, you can't tell me how to run my business and what people want to see. Because if they wanted to see your kind of wrestling you're talking about, that's what we would have out there, Bob. Okay? But as things progress, as you make it more of a soap opera.
Or regress. Or devolve.
You can say regress, whatever you want. Or devolve, whatever you want to say. That's your prerogative. Just like it's your prerogative not to watch, okay? It's your prerogative not to watch. But when you see the millions and millions of people every week who watch this kind of programming and enjoy it strictly for what it is, because the key word there is fun. And if it doesn't ring your chimes, That's fine with that. Just don't watch it, Bob.
So these are your answers. But surely you can't object to the questions, because those are the questions that are out there about the WWF. And here's another question.
Wait a minute.
Do you think in some way that this type of programming contributes? Certainly not the biggest part of it, but contributes. You don't even know what I'm going to ask you.
Oh, yeah, I do.
To the incivility and coarseness that's generally out there in the culture now. Does it contribute in some way? Do you pump some of that into the water supply?
Maybe some.
Do you regret that?
I don't think we do on much, but there might be a little bit of that. You know, I don't know. I don't know what Sopranos does. I don't know what Sex and the City does. I don't know what any of these programs, these soap operas on daytime TV. I mean, we may be a part of a problem, no more of a part of a problem than anything that's out there on television. Certainly no more of a part of a problem.
Recently in Florida, a 14-year-old boy has been on trial for killing a then 6-year-old girl using wrestling moves which he saw on television. I don't know if for sure he saw them on the WWF, but he could have. No one is saying, and there isn't research to back up any direct causal relationship between seeing that or seeing war movies, but does it give you pause at all to read something like that?
You're supposed to come here and know your stuff, okay? And if you're going to jump me and jump all over me, then you should have watched some of this. And you should really know your facts.
I've seen some
I'm disappointed.
Vince, I've seen some of it.
Would you let me finish?
Absolutely.
What I'm going to say there, pal, okay? With a big smile.
This is amusing me.
No, it's amusing you. You're amusing me.
Okay, good. We're both amused.
It's your show, so, you know, you've got to have the forum here. I understand that. You know, I understood that when I came on.
And I've given you the forum as well.
So, to answer the question, if you stop to interrupt me, let me answer the questions here. You got a situation that you don't know what you're talking about.
Is the child not on trial in Florida?
No, the child's been convicted.
Right.
He's a murderer. And if you'd have done the slightest bit of research, you would have known what the polling of the jury was, that this absurd notion that this child was practicing wrestling maneuvers was a complete hoax.
Let me finish. They rejected that as a defense.
Let me finish.
They rejected that as a defense.
Would you please let me finish?
Absolutely.
You know, you are? Well, you sure? You're not going to interrupt me. You let me finish.
Just because I inject something doesn't mean you're not going to have time to respond. You've had plenty of time to respond, and continue.
So the jury says, sure, not only did we reject it, this had nothing to do with the murder of this child. As a matter of fact, from a defense standpoint, the attorney didn't even raise that defense for quite some time after the incident. Now then, take it one step further and listen to what the judge had to say. The judge had to say the same thing, that this was an absurd hoax, this whole wrestling theory. This child, the 6-year-old child, didn't die because there was horseplay. The 6-year-old child died because of the brutality of the 12-year-old, I believe, at the time. Mm-hmm. There was no practicing wrestling maneuvers, and you can't fool a jury and or a judge, and they all said that this was absolutely an absurd notion, should not have been raised to begin with. So and don't take it from me, go back and do something you should have done before you brought me out here. Go read the facts, Bob.
Does any of the violence in wrestling programming, it's not all WWF, but you're the most successful purveyor of this material, does any of the violence in wrestling, like any of the violence elsewhere in popular culture, in your view, contribute in some way? We may not be able to say exactly A leads to B, but contribute in some way to a lack of civility and maybe even perhaps to violence within society?
I don't think it contributes to violence as far as a lack of civility. Now, I'm sure, knowing you, your definition of civility and mine are probably two different things.
Perhaps.
Okay, I bet on that one, okay? But I would suggest this. When you look at a World Wrestling Federation entertainment program on television, even though we are a soap opera, an action-adventure, a little comedy thrown in there and all of that, we don't use guns, we don't use knives, there's no portrayal of murder, no portrayal of rape, all right? So we do what we do, you know, and have a lot of fun with it, a lot of folding metal chairs and things of that nature, garbage cans. We have lots of fun with that, okay? But we don't even use household items normally, all right, in the way that we present our fun. So I don't think that we in any way, you know, contribute to the violence. Violence, to me, is just what I've said, guns and knives and rape and robbery and murder and that sort of stuff. We don't do that.
What about degradation or objectification of women?
Generally speaking, if you stay with our storylines long enough, unlike you taking one little segment, okay, just to smear me, just to absolutely smear me with this one thing, and thank you very much for that. That's a real class move on your part. So when you take that, okay, and you do that.
If I were to resort to your type of responses, it's interesting to see you lecturing somebody about class, but...
No, what? I don't have class?
I'm saying you're a strange one to be delivering that lecture. I'm responding in kind to the sort of things that... So now you interrupted me again, right? Sorry. Proceed. No, proceed. You know what? This is the Bob Costas Interrupt program, right? It's a characterization I think few would share, but it might work for you in this instance.
It worked for me. I mean, take a look at the tape when you play it back. Right. How many times did Bob Costas interrupt Vince McMahon before he let him answer the question?
Just to try to keep you on point. Go ahead.
Sure. So, I mean, again, I think that, when you look at everything that we do on balance in terms of entertainment, you stay with the storyline, Bob, okay? Our women are extremely strong. Now, I would suggest that the degradation, as you called it, of Trish, which was of her own volition, by the way. I wasn't making her do that. This is a soap opera. If you stay tuned long enough, boy, I would suggest unlikely to get mine as far as that character is concerned, as far as the Vince McMahon character is concerned. The women involved in World Wrestling Federation, from China all the way down, are very, very strong-willed women who, generally speaking, at the end of the day in the soap opera, get what they want and then some. But you have to stay tuned, Bob. It's not fair to take one little excerpt of this and one little excerpt of that and then generalize, okay?
Let's end on this.
We have to end? I'm having fun.
We have to end. I'm enjoying it too, but Bob Knight is waiting. Right. And he deserves his time as well.
Coach Knight.
Coach Knight is waiting. Safety of wrestlers. Not long ago, you settled a wrongful death suit with the widow of the wrestler Owen Hart. Had to pay $18 million. He was killed or died during a show in Kansas City when executing a maneuver. Right. Have you pulled back on the level of risk in some of these maneuvers?
As far as anything aerial, absolutely. We would never attempt to do anything like we were doing with Owen again, because out of deference to Owen, if for no other reason. But yeah, I mean, again, I think that the risk factor increases, with the athletes, no different as it does in all of sport, by the way. And here we have the greatest entertainers in the world in the World Wrestling Federation Entertainment, and I dare say some of the greatest athletes as well. They do jump that risk thing quite often, absolutely.
Vince, we got to go.
Oh, it's too bad. This is such a delightful show, Bob. And thank you so much for having me on.
I appreciate your coming on.
Oh, thank you very much. It's a delight.
Brian, what do you think?
I like the line that Vince had about the clip that was played was of Vince being out of character, and then throughout the rest of the interview, Vince was, totally in character. I think the funny thing was, we got all this feedback last night, people going, Vince has finally become Mr. McMahon. And I was just thinking, I think that Vince has been like this forever. It's just this is a real high-profile, a real profile appearance that everybody can see of Vince just being Vince.
I think, we've talked about it before, how people in wrestling become their characters.
Yeah.
And I don't think that Vince was always like this. I mean, I've dealt with him, a lot at certain times, and in situations very similar to this. But even in those situations, I had never felt listening to this. I had thought, I'll tell you, based on, and this is again from reading all the different things that I had read without actually hearing this or seeing this, I had thought that listening to this, that Vince McMahon would come off much better than viewing this. And listening to this, I mean, like a minute in, I was going he is such an asshole. And the other thing is that to me, listening to this, I didn't see at all any negativity by Costas. I mean, the whole thing of, trying to get that they showed the clip of the Trish Stratus thing from a week ago Monday, edited it. I mean, what did they expect to show 15 straight minutes? Of course they're going to show the strongest points because they're going to make the strong. If your question is, did they go too far with that clip, or do they sometimes go too far? With that question, the clip you do not show is of two guys holding a headlock, which does happen more often in the thing than that. You show the most extreme thing, and that's what they showed is the most extreme clip. Trying to say that, that's like not in context, or in fact, if she or some woman, whether it's her or not, is going to get revenge at some point, does not change that stuff did air on television.
The thing I like,
that's not a defense. The fact that maybe she'll get revenge down the line if you watch week after week, and maybe she will, or maybe Linda McMahon will for her, or whatever the story will end up being. That's not a defense that's not a defense at all of that.
Of what airing?
Of that thing airing, when 953,000 children under the age of 11 were watching. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily bad. I'm just saying that is not a defense of it.
Mm-hmm. The thing I
you can all make your decision of that.
Vince kept, he kept saying over and over, "Quit interrupting me. Why are you interrupting me? Let me finish. Blah blah blah." And it was
that's because he was.
Costas was like listening to Vince. He would ask these questions, and Vince would he would go off on this tangent, or he would try to avoid the question, or try and segue into something else, and Costas wouldn't let him do it, and it was just driving Vince crazy.
Yeah, and the other one is when talking about, there was a certain thing in some of the emails. I think that a lot of people felt that Bob Costas represents these people who look down on us, and I never heard one comment where Bob Costas was looking down on wrestling fans, and that surprised me because I thought that he was the feeling that he was insulting wrestling fans in this, and I didn't sense it. And the other thing is that I guess was made clear, and I didn't know it was made clear based on a lot of the feedback I got, is it was very clear that Bob Costas was a wrestling fan almost his entire life, which I happen to know because I've had interaction with Bob Costas over the years, and in fact he was at one point when he was a wrestling fan was a reader of the Wrestling Observer newsletter. So he was not just a wrestling fan; he was a relatively informed wrestling fan who, as he became a big star, didn't have as much time for it, and then in 1991 grew to dislike it over the exploitation of the Persian Gulf War. That was where he stepped out. In fact, he was actually going to do that WrestleMania, some role in that WrestleMania. Found out that angle and felt that by doing, that angle would justify that show, or he couldn't bring himself to participate in that show. He did the right thing, which took a lot of guts. He walked off, didn't do it, and never came and didn't come back. Mm-hmm. And in fact, just was it last year? He was the host of a wrestling special on KMOX. It was the one that Larry Madison, we've done the show many times, put together, and he was very favorable towards wrestling. So it's not like Bob Costas is this wrestling hater. Vince tried to portray him as that. And the one thing that I sensed, in fact, Bruce Mitchell, I think, said it really best last night when he called me up after watching the show, and he just goes, "There's enough here where the people who need to defend Vince will defend Vince, but anyone who's not in that category is going to really look down on Vince." So, and I don't know. The thing also, even in the, where he was, the whole, what's the word I'm looking for, disingenuous speak in the Tate case, we talked about yesterday, the whole thing of the judge threw it out, which in fact, as far as the jury saying that wrestling had nothing to do with it, no evidence of wrestling was allowed to be entered into the case. That was the judge's ruling before the case, and I'm not saying the judge was right or wrong. He probably was right, because because wrestling should not have been a defense of a murder. That's not to say he was not, or he was imitating wrestling. The move, the quote wrestling move that we talked about yesterday, was the Steve Austin stomp a mud hole in someone, is what the experts think is what happened and caused all these injuries. That is a maneuver that he may have picked up from watching pro wrestling. They cannot deny that or say that that's a hoax. And the judge never used the word hoax, although the judge,
I hate that word hoax anyway, because when you use the word hoax, you're not saying that. If it's something that you want to use for a defense, and the judge goes, "Okay, this is not a defense," it's not a hoax. Now, if you wanted to do a defense on wrestling, and you you conspired with L. Brent Bozell, like Vince claimed in the lawsuit or whatever, to make this stuff up or plant evidence or whatever.
But we both know that that's a crock.
Yeah, but that would be a hook. Okay.
Yeah, no, if they sat there and they did conspire, absolutely, that's a hoax.
Yeah, just having a bad defense is not a hoax.
Yeah, or a stupid, an invalid defense. But the invalid defense does not, and the result of that trial have nothing to do with where he learned that behavior. And we're not saying that wrestling was the reason, but nobody can say conclusively if wrestling was or wasn't, and for either side to say conclusively. The defense attorney, Jim Lewis, was clearly full of it. He had no case. Okay, he was reaching. But on the other side, to use, the result of the case as saying, like, here, this proves wrestling had nothing to do with it. As we said when that case came down, that result of that case proved nothing other than the jury believed that that kid killed the other kid. Yeah. And he's being punished for it, as he should be.
Yeah.
Let's see. Any other things that you want to bring up on this? We actually have Cody Monk on the line, too. Cody, why don't you bring Cody up? Cody, what's going on?
Hey, guys. How are you guys doing?
Hey.
We're doing really, really good. We just listened to the wrestling aspect, not the XFL aspect, although we could talk about the XFL stuff as well. Vince McMahon on HBO, and I understand that you actually watched the show last night.
Actually, I have not seen the tape yet. I've read all accounts and talked to several people who have seen it. I was unfortunately out last night, but it definitely sounds like a tape I got to get a hold of, because from everything I've read, it was classic Vince, and being in the sports media business, classic Bob Costas also.
It will be replayed tonight, if I'm not mistaken, at 11 o'clock, and then again, or either 11 o'clock Eastern or midnight Eastern, and then again Saturday morning at 11 a.m. on HBO.
As long as Monmouth isn't almost upsetting Duke, I'll have to be by the channel for that one.
But Brian, do you have any more comments on it before, as far as some of the other stuff that was talked about in the clip?
I was just getting so frustrated with Vince, like. Bob's asking him about demographics and trying to point out that HBO is a pay channel and cable TV is not. And Vince is here, instead of trying to, express why he believes that they're the same thing, he's talking about, well, if you don't like it, change the channel. And it's like, what does that have to do with, the question that you were asked? And then Costas tries to get him back on track, and Vince is going like, oh, well, you're interrupting me again.
Well, the one thing about that is that, like, nobody has ever said that the WWF is the worst thing for children on television, because clearly it's not. Clearly, there's real porn on television that we can watch. Okay, I mean, if we want to, on it's on premium, but you can watch it. Clearly, the WWF. So you're talking about premium channels. Clearly, the WWF isn't. Mm-hmm. But the big argument on why the WWF gets hit is because of its viewing audience. You can bring up Sopranos and Sex and the City. Neither of them have nearly 1 million viewers under the age of 11. They probably have very few viewers. I bet they skew very old. So it's like, because of what it appeals to, I'm not there. Okay, to me, this is not censorship. This is responsibility. To me, a responsible broadcaster could go, okay, this is my audience. There are certain things that if our demographics on this show were we found out that there were a lot of listeners under the age of 16, I would never swear on this show. The fact that very few are, and I don't really swear on it anyway, but the point is, I feel less inhibited because I know what our demographics are, and we don't have 2 to 11s listening to the show. If we did, I wouldn't approach the subjects any different, but I would certainly approach the language different. And to, keep bringing up, hey, there's, Sopranos or Sex and the City. Hey, there's porn. There's porn on television. The WWF's not the worst thing on television. At the same time, as far as television shows that draw that kind of a very young audience, it probably is by far the raunchiest thing on. I mean, and that's the argument. And you can say, well, it's okay because kids are exposed to it in the movies or something. That's fine, but that's the argument. The argument, so to bring up...
comparison to, like, daytime soaps. What kid's going to be home during the day watching soaps except a kid that dropped out of school is going to have problems anyway?
Well, the whole point is that the numbers aren't even close as far as that goes. And then Vince on SmackDown is bragging about, his family audience.
Yeah.
So, okay, if you're bragging about the audience and then you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which, by the way, I mean, I don't think that there's, like, I don't know what stats he's using, but the idea that there's more family audience watching SmackDown than, say, a lot of more popular shows on television, that's...
Probably the same stats that got the 53 million viewers for XFL.
Yeah, for the XFL debut. I mean, they get 1.6 viewers per household. There are shows that get a lot more, which would mean that more kids, more families or more members of families are watching together. Most shows get less, I think most shows get less. So, I mean, that's probably not the case. And then the other thing was, as far as okay. I've always like with the WWF, the whole argument is like, we have different standards for like the morning shows, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's well and good and wonderful because, as anyone who's looked at the stats on the morning shows knows, kids don't watch it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, not don't, but in percentage, there's probably 4 times as many kids watching the second hour of Raw than are watching any of those morning shows. And whether that's so, if you're gonna go out there and say, we edit, because we edit when we think kids are watching. It's like, well, then you should be editing the 2 hours of Raw more than any other show, because that's the show that the kids are watching more than any other show. Okay? The other thing is it's a bullshit argument. Anyway, Cody.
How are you guys?
Having said all that.
That was a nice diatribe there. I was enjoying listening to that.
Well, I'm sure everybody was. On both sides of the fence on this issue.
No, I'll just jump in a little bit on that. I think I kind of take a little bit of a different approach to you guys than what a lot of people take on that. Maybe it's just the way that I view television in general, but I don't put a lot of stock in people blaming companies and blaming media companies for what they put on television. In the World Wrestling Federation, WCW, whoever you want to lump into there, even your local independent promotions that have cable access shows. I don't blame them for what goes on television. For the most part, people know what's on those shows, and maybe it's from just living in the part of the country that I live in and growing up the way that I grew up. But I feel that it's a personal responsibility for somebody to monitor what their children are watching, and to monitor what they see. I don't think that's the responsibility of the WWF or ABC or NBC or anybody else.
I never said it is. I'm just saying that if they're saying that we edit certain shows for children, how come why don't they edit the shows that children are actually watching rather than the shows that children aren't watching?
No, I understand your argument. I'm not trying to say that that you said that. I'm just giving my opinion on that.
As far as like, of course, in a perfect world, parents would be monitoring shows for children, and a lot of them do, and that's fine. And I'm not an advocate of censorship, but I am an advocate of responsibility. When you're going like, okay, we know what our audience is. Okay, we brag about our audience, in one sentence, so we can't say that we don't know what it is. And then we go in there and we're writing for, as he said many times, we write for a mature audience. It's like, well, wait a minute, but that's not your audience. I mean, it is part of your audience, but it's not your whole audience. And I think that's where, it kind of falls apart to me.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think you have to be responsible to a point. I don't think there's any question about that. But I don't think you can go in there and say, okay, well, a 10-year-old in Los Angeles likes the same thing as a 10-year-old in Des Moines, Iowa. So, we're going to write for, we're going to write. We think we have to be responsible this week. So we're not going to write as raunchy or as provocative as we would have 2 weeks ago. Or I don't think. But
that's the business decision that they fight every week based on their ratings. I mean, we both know that there are weeks where they are so clean because they've gotten heat, and then there are weeks when they're not because they're scared their ratings are dropping, even though when they toned down SmackDown, the ratings went up. But there's always that feeling when ratings start going down, you hit the panic button, and the panic button to them is always, go more salacious. It's just the natural reaction because that is what got them up there the first time. It's sort of overdone. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what the effect of this is going to be on the ratings. I mean, who knows? I mean, a lot of people turned off their TV after the Trish thing last week. Is it because of the Trish thing? I don't know. I just know that, 1.1 million people turned off their TV after that. So was that good or was that bad? But they had a big spike for it. So, there's so many different ways you can look at those numbers and figure what they mean.
Yeah, it's just like in anything, the way that radio numbers are looked at, or the way that Nielsen's are looked at, or whatever you want to look at, they can be skewed in the way that you want them to. They can be massaged to look however you want them to look.
Only Bruce can do that with WCW, though.
That's a good point.
Successfully.
There's a big XFL story today as well. For those people who believe that Vince has lost his mind, and there was quite a bit of evidence of it yesterday. Another one was today's LA Times article where he talked about, he basically said that Jesse Ventura was on thin ice. He goes, here's some of the quotes. He goes, we've made mistakes, and I think the biggest one was our selection of announcers. We need football announcers, not WWF announcers. Now, the funny thing on that one is we've talked about many times, I think the best announcer that they had on any of those shows happened to be a WWF announcer who they dumped.
I think the best announcer was Jim Ross. I mean, absolutely. I mean, I assume that's who you're talking about.
Absolutely.
He fired one of them, or he run them resign, in Lawler. But I wrote a column on JR a couple of weeks ago simply because I don't think a lot of people gave JR his due.
The media was unfair to him.
No, it's people have been completely unfair to him. Rudy. Yeah. Rudy Marks. You can take stories about that guy. If you want stories, about someone. But Jr.
Well, they tried to tell him already, which I think dug them into a deeper hole.
well, I don't think stories about Markey are that bad, but we can talk about that later. But Jr. This is a guy that he absolutely loves football. I mean. I'll talk to JR every now and then, and half the time we'll talk about Oklahoma football more than we'll talk about wrestling. We'll have a 5-minute conversation about wrestling and an hour-long conversation about Oklahoma football and what linebacker they're looking at from Fort Worth, River Oaks, Castleberry. He just absolutely loves football, and he's good at announcing. He's 17 years as an official. He knows the game. He prepares at least a day and a half for those XFL games, and he loved doing what he was doing. I don't think JR was the reason that the XFL announcing was bad, but I do think that Vince might have been creating to a little bit of media pressure there, in that JR got ripped pretty hard by a lot of mainstream publications.
Yeah. I don't think that Vince is really losing his mind yet. I mean, he may, but I think he's under so much pressure and stress right now that he's to the point where he's not really thinking rationally on some things, and he's saying some things that he's probably going to regret. And I was reading some of the quotes in that article, and that whole article in general, and it was almost like reading a parody article, because some of these things that Vince said were so funny, and he was talking about, I've heard rumblings that the NFL is looking at stealing some of our ideas. And it's like, you didn't think about that on day one. I mean,
and stealing every one of your top players if they can play there.
That's next.
We talked about that before the first game, that if Vince had a good idea, of course the NFL would be fools not to look at stealing it.
Yep, and he was making all the comments about Ventura. He's going Ventura's too over the top for the XFL, even though it's like.
But it's like that was the presentation they wanted.
Yeah, and then my favorite one is.
And what do you get from Ventura? I mean, you're hiring Jesse Ventura to be straight.
Yeah. And he's talking about Vescursion and how he didn't think he was what he was looking for. And so Vince goes, we sent him down to the B team, and he honed his skills, and then he returned.
How do you hone your skills when you get 3 minutes a night?
It's like, how are you honing your skills
when you're sitting there with Waller looking at cheerleaders?
Yeah, exactly. When they cut to you and the producer has to say, hey, Jerry, Matt, you guys are on. Why don't you make a comment? But the thing that I thought was funny about Ventura is you talk about someone that doesn't prepare. Good Lord, that guy doesn't prepare for. He was like that, back in his WCW days when he announced with JR. But
it was like that in the WWF too.
Oh, but
he got by on delivery and charm.
I guess it got absolutely worse with this XFL stuff. A couple of weeks ago, I was watching a game, and Jesse comes out and he says, "This is offense versus defense. You got to love that." Really? Is that I expected him to say, JR, the team with the most points is going to win this football game. And you expected that to come next. That's how he's just been speaking in hyperbole this whole time. Like Vince, I think people get tired of that.
Hyperbole turns people off, Vince said. They know when you're not telling the truth.
I know. Wasn't that just a classic?
That was a great line.
Well, Jesse is telling the truth. Offense versus defense is what you're looking for.
But that's, he really, the way I read this, when I read this article, it was like, he wants to get rid of Jesse, but he's trying to make sure that Jesse quits. Because if Jesse quits, he may not have to pay him because obviously Jesse's the highest paid guy in that whole league, and that league's losing a lot of money. And it's not just a cost-cutting measure, because quite frankly, Jesse has been a disappointment, and I'm sure he wouldn't be asked back for next season no matter what. And it's just, it's a way to get rid of him. I just thought, wow. It's like he's, instead of talking to him and having him kind of resign in a nice way, it's like, he's backdooring him. And he backdoored JR too in a sense.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was him or NBC, but he was backdoored.
Well, I've talked to several people, and I've been to a couple of games, but the thing that they're having the most problem with is translating how fun a live game can be to television. That's their biggest problem. Everybody that goes to those XFL games, they'll tell you they've had a blast. Those guys, San Francisco, the guys in LA, Las Vegas that I've talked to and seen and been with, they've completely enjoyed themselves. But when you watch it on television, that doesn't translate, and a lot of that is because of the announcers. But if that's the case, then you would think that you'd want somebody who injects a lot of enthusiasm. Well, that's JR. You'd think you'd want somebody who can give a little bit of analysis. That they don't have. But you put Vasgersian in there, he's more of a straight guy, so now you've kind of got a paradox. And as I wrote my XFL column yesterday, you've got fans wanting over the top and analysis and a mix of good football, yet you've got a presentation that really can't decide what it wants to do. Does it want to be over the top, or does it want to go straight football and rely on its competition? And it's those are two paths that have yet to meet.
Yeah, the other thing is, like the complaints of, his new thing is that, the play was bad at the beginning of the season, and it has gotten better, and of course, and naturally would, but going we didn't have camp to prepare these guys in preseason games, and it's like, there's a lot of good reasons. Exactly, yeah. So
Same with his quote at the end, the type of announcers we're looking for are all tied up by Fox. Well, great. You should have thought about that too.
Yeah, when the season started.
Don't everything in this article.
But now here's the other one too. Don't even hint to me that there's not plenty of football announcers out there and that Fox has every single good one.
Yeah.
I mean, there's people who are doing, local college football at every level in every market that are competent announcers.
Well, he's going to have to give somebody a shot. I mean, he's going to. But you know what? And I think the crux of this problem, and you guys know this, but I think the crux of the problem is Vince may be spreading himself too thin, because whenever you talk about finding local college announcers, you're talking about doing research. You're talking about listening to tapes. You're talking about analyzing tapes. You're talking about, actually having to go interview somebody or bring somebody in. That takes time, and Vince doesn't have a lot of that right now.
Well, it's not necessarily Vince. It's the people in the league. But the one thing is they wanted, if you remember when the season started, they did not want one announcer who had ever done a football game. I mean, that was the key. Now he's saying we want the guys from Fox. It was at the beginning. It was like, we don't want anyone who's ever done a football game because we don't want them a standard football presentation. We want, they wanted WWF announcers. They did it. And then, obviously it didn't work. But the one guy who, I know it was a concession to the media, and it was a concession to the idea that the perception that a lot of the fans had was that they're not watching it because it's too much WWF, and JR, realistically is so associated with the WWF that if you're going to get rid of WWF content, you almost have to get rid of him, and you almost have to get rid of Jesse too.
No, I think you're right about that, because, no matter how much broadcast experience JR has, or how much football experience has, or no matter how much you talk about it, people are just going to see that he's the lead guy for WWF, Raw's War Monday nights. And
they're not going to take him seriously, which is, it's unfortunate, because like we talked about this on the show. Vasgersian was a baseball announcer. Ross was a wrestling announcer. It isn't, being a baseball announcer doesn't necessarily make you a better football announcer than a wrestling announcer. They're both coming from different worlds. But and again, Ross has done football before, and Ross has watched football. We all know Ross is like a super big football fan. I mean, it's a running joke.
But in the mainstream media, you're going to get people who obviously think that making the transition from Milwaukee Brewers baseball to football is a much more acceptable and much more easily done step than making the change from World Wrestling Federation to football. Where I read a script where somebody said, well, he's the best damn wrestling announcer in the business, and a guy from the Washington Post writes, well, what does that mean? He reads the script better than anybody else.
Right, yeah, we talked about it. Well, there's a lot of uninformed people. The problem with wrestling, the nature of wrestling is that everybody thinks they understand it, and then, nobody does, which is why only one guy's making money doing it in the whole world, or in this whole country anyway.
He was talking in this article, or he's been talking everywhere. He's, blaming the media. They have Jim Ross come on Raw and talk about, you need to write to the media and tell them this, that, and the other thing and everything. And it's like, look at what the media says about Raw and about SmackDown. Why isn't it affecting their ratings?
Well, I don't think you see just a whole lot of Raw and SmackDown stuff in mainstream media.
But there was at one point when the ratings were actually higher than they are now.
But second of all,
but this thing didn't fail because people gave it bad reviews. It failed because the fans that watched the first game, because everyone gave it a chance. It got phenomenal first week, and they didn't like it. The TV presentation wasn't good.
Well, actually, guys, I don't mean to interject here, but and obviously we'll play the XFL part of it tomorrow on tomorrow's show. But basically, Vince was saying last night during the interview, he says in 4 weeks it has gotten better. The players are better because they didn't have the typical preseason like the NFL has. So the players.
But the ratings still dropped with every week.
Right. And he's saying that the players couldn't gel as quickly. And he said, basically he hopes that the media, which, of course, throughout the course of the interview last night, he said, they are unfair to him, and he doesn't care about that, but he hopes that the media will take another look at the quality of football that's out on the field now, as opposed to just looking at it as Vince McMahon's product. you know.
But he didn't endear himself to any media person with that interview last night.
No,
if that's what he wanted to do, he certainly handled it completely wrong.
Right, and then Bob Costas had asked him the question. He said, well, will you fix the games if the ratings don't go so well this year, meaning next season? And basically he said, oh, that's a ridiculous statement. And he says, well, I'm not making a statement. And he says, no, you're asking a question. And he
still
said,
got to catch the ball.
Exactly, that's exactly what he said. He said, you can't script football. You have to catch the ball. And he said, basically, you can't be a success in a year. You can't brand a product in a year. You have to give it time. But how, my feeling
that's not what he said before.
Right, but how long, my feeling, and he said it too, he says, how long can, I understand the commitments that the network has, but, how much money can you pour into this if it's a losing proposition?
I think it's not so much money as much as how can NBC accept those numbers? I mean, when you're flirting with all-time record low ratings on a weekly basis, and it's, an embarrassment, it's like, how much can NBC, it's not even, obviously it's a money thing, but it's a ratings thing.
Well, and a lot of things too is, I wrote about this yesterday. They have promised so much and yet not delivered. And I think eventually when you cry like that and people come to see how come you're crying, and then you cry wolf one too many times, and people eventually aren't going to come back. They
WCW.
Promised they promised the hard hits, the in your face type stuff, that the commercials promised, and we really didn't see that the first couple of weeks. Now that you can blame that on level of play if you want, but then you see some things like, okay, we're going to go inside the cheerleaders' locker rooms. Okay, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, and yet none of that ever materialized. I think eventually they're going to have to stop promising what they can't deliver.
Well, like the thing where Costas asked him, and this was in the football interview, about if the ratings continue to go, will you do more salacious stuff? And he was going, no. And it's just like, well, what did last week say? What did the week before? First, with Vince Hillman, as a pro wrestling stunt when the ratings went down. Then the cheerleader thing the next week when the ratings were down. It's like, the evidence tells me.
That was just a parody.
Yeah, but it wasn't advertised as a parody.
Yeah.
It's great to say it after the fact. It's like, but if he had told people we're going to do a parody, ha ha ha, it wouldn't have moved the ratings, and we all know it. That's the only reason the ratings on that show actually didn't drop as compared to the other two shows, the two Sunday shows where the ratings were down again. Mm-hmm. Anyway, I want to read a couple of emails. We've got a lot of emails today. This is from Scott Foy, who goes, I think a whole new field of psychology could be founded based simply around the erratic behavior of Vince McMahon. I kept wondering if the reason Costas was so easy on Bobby Knight was because after the way McMahon acted, he was afraid what might happen if he antagonized a guy who has a history of physically attacking people. It's from Paul Galbraith, who goes, good Lord, Vince has finally lost his mind. Not only is he pulling out stunts on Raw that make even hardened wrestling fans flush in embarrassment, now on the Costas show he came off like a complete ass. Don't get me wrong, Costas was ill-prepared and uninformed, but McMahon took an interview that he could have dominated in the PR department and managed to look terrible. To the average sports fan, which is what McMahon is trying to appeal to now, he must appear as everything the WF stereotype portrays him to be, a loudmouth, obnoxious, pig-headed jerk. The question I have is, why? Why is McMahon acting like he's out of control when in the past his cold, calculating nature was his greatest asset as a businessman? Is it steroid abuse, job stress, personal life issues, or what? The behavior seems totally inexplicable. It's having to deal with failure.
Yeah.
You got to remember he's had enormous success for years and years. He's had failure in his past, plenty. He's had plenty of the stuff that's erased from that personal history that we always read.
Mm-hmm.
But he's had it, but he hasn't had it lately.
I don't think it's fair to say that Costas is totally unprepared. There were a couple of questions that he probably could have done some more research on, but to say he was totally unprepared, there's just no way.
I think the reason that Costas softballed Knight is because after Vince McMahon, Bob Knight was a breath of fresh air for Costas. If you can say
That's unbelievable, too. This is from Rob, who goes, can you answer a couple of things? This is actually, is Pride going to be running worked fights on the upcoming pay-per-view? I do not know. We won't know until we see the fights. I would guess that there's one fight, which is Satake Yasuda, where you could say going in it might be suspicious. But the fact is, if that fight is real, the end. I think that it's pretty much clear that Satake is going to win that fight. But if it was real, he certainly should anyway. So I don't know that it's going to be worked. Not that they haven't done it. He goes, have they ever ran a worked fight on an American pay-per-view? I believe the answer to that one is yes. And what are your thoughts on Pride? Do you think they will be the downfall of No Holds Barred? I think actually the opposite. I think that Pride
would they be the downfall?
I think the feeling is for a purist because they have run work fights on occasion to protect the professional wrestlers.
You got to do what you have to do, though.
Well,
I guess that's probably not the best.
Yeah, that's not. No, you know
it.
what? But that's like a boxing promoter justifying working a fight, or Vince McMahon justifying working a football game. You know, I mean, it's like, I understand why a purist. I really understand why people would. I mean, I understand why they do it. It's all business, and also because the people who run Pride, and the other thing is, it's all business, and it's what people who are not, and who don't understand what Pride is. It's the professional wrestling business. That's what Pride is. Pride, it's not traditional pro wrestling. It's the pro wrestling business. The people who go to Pride shows are professional wrestling fans, and sometimes you have to protect drawing cards, or else they won't be drawing cards. That is their belief for their business. Whether, because 90% of their matches or more are not worked, and 10% are, you can believe me. I could look at that if I was an athletic commissioner. I wouldn't want it.
Yeah.
I wouldn't,
I mean, I just look at it as, say it came to a point where UFC was doing so bad financially that they could only pay $50 a fighter, and they were bringing in people that didn't know what they were doing, and the shows were horrible, and everyone was unhappy. And if they had perhaps done, maybe a work fight on a main event show to build up a future match to help business, and it saved a thing and saved them some money, and they were able to use that money to, save the thing from going under, then, I think it's not pure sport, but it'll keep the thing alive.
That's because we all come from a wrestling background. But you know what? From a sports background, there's nothing worse than something than a fix.
Yeah.
This is from Chris, who goes, isn't Vince McMahon only 50% responsible for man-on-woman violence and the rape-esque angles, since the WWF demonic fans cheer each and every time such behavior occurs? Clearly, if the fans turned their back on it, he wouldn't do it. It's no one, he gives the fans what he thinks the fans want. The fans also are led by what he wants. It's a circle, And he goes, there's two more. Is there such thing as winning and losing? I think Vince McMahon won. And here's one who says, it was sad to see Vince shoot himself in the foot because the points and facts were on his side, but he made himself look like such an ass that the facts and Costas' lack of knowledge and preparedness will go unnoticed. Now, you know what? Vince kept saying that Costas was unprepared and unknowledgeable, but Costas knows wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't get any evidence of that other than when he brought up the crotch chops and the suck it, which they did do for 2 years, which they have not done in a year, which is true. But the point is they have done it, and it is a logical.
The trial was over.
What?
In fact, he didn't know the trial was over.
He didn't know the end of the trial was over. That's true. But
just because Vince says a million times that a guy's unprepared doesn't mean he is. Yeah,
I mean, he knew what he needed to know. He knew the Owen Hart lawsuit was settled for $18 million. I mean, did he know wrestling front and back? No. Did he watch it? He wouldn't have the time to watch it. It's not his field of expertise. He probably could have been more prepared, but to say he was ill prepared, I don't know. I mean, I listened to what he said. I didn't find any of his questions embarrassing.
No.
Oh, I want to mention we have Lawler on. Jerry Lawler's going to be on the 28th. We tried to get Lawler on for the WrestleMania show, and for those of you who don't know, we'll be doing a 1-hour show from midnight to 1 a.m. Eastern Time, immediately after, or, at the hour, so probably 10 minutes after WrestleMania ends. Brian and I will be on. But Lawler actually is going to be on an airplane and not watching WrestleMania, so he's not going to be able to do it, but he will be on the Wednesday before WrestleMania. So that's.
Dave, are y'all going to be in Houston?
What?
Are y'all going to be in Houston?
I am not going to be in Houston. I'm going to be here, watching it and then doing the show.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you get the email about John Tenta?
Yeah. We're going to try to set up the show with John Tenta as well.
So for all of you that have been requesting the Shark, we're going to try and set it up.
Well, somebody was. Remember?
The email will be going out in a few moments.
Okay. This is from Tom, who goes, who is McMahon kidding? He portrayed his daughter Stephanie getting raped by X-Pac and Road Dogg. Actually, it wasn't. It was wasn't it a gang rape of a they hinted it was Stephanie, but it later came out that it was just an incidental co-ed at Penn State. Remember that one? But they did portray gang rape, absolutely. And there's been at least a couple of other instances as well.
I do vaguely remember that.
What?
I do vaguely remember that.
Yeah, and he also had Brian Pillman flash a gun. Yeah, Brian Pillman used a gun. Steve Austin was a gun.
Don't forget the knife. Undertaker.
The knife with Undertaker with a knife. Yeah, I know. We've been through that one before. I don't know why he keeps saying that, because we keep sitting there going like, wait a minute, that's not true either. I don't know that the facts are that much on his side, because we keep looking through this, and I don't know. He goes, I believe Vince made some good points, one being suck it and crotch chop crap. You can't go back to what happened a year ago. Okay, suck it, you're right, absolutely. Crotch chop, they did it on Monday. It's not going back a year. Now, Vince actually never, to his credit, he was very careful with what he said, because I had heard that same thing from a lot of the emails. People going like, oh, Vince said they haven't done crotch chops. Well, they do it. They're doing it right now. And the fact is, he specifically said that we haven't had anyone grab their crotch or say "suck it" in over a year to a year and a half. He didn't say no one's crotch chopped, which was part of Costas' thing. But they have done crotch chops. They were doing it on Monday night. They're going to do it tonight, I'm sure. And the fact that they did it's a valid question, I think. I don't know. You can't go back to what happened a year ago and try to put down the current product with it. He was just putting down what has been done. While I do not like the Trish angle, you can't use stuff that happened long ago. The Trish angle was a week ago Monday. Okay. Let's see. While Costa seemed fairly professional, I think a sane wrestling promoter would have eaten him alive in defending pro wrestling. Vince didn't. The interview came off like the final revelation of an evil madman in a Victorian Gothic mystery.
I wouldn't say the final one yet.
Yeah. Dave, when he said that he used to be a fan but wasn't anymore, he said it like wrestling was a pile of crap. He's above watching such garbage and we're all idiots from watching it. That's how I took it. All he said was he used to be a fan and isn't anymore. That's all he said. Oh, my God. How can you say
maybe
you don't
when we
have
watch
young...
the tape, he'll be rolling his eyes and holding up a sign that says "Wrestling fans are stupid."
Yeah. You say you don't have younger listeners or whatever, but you have no clue. Yes, I do. We do demographic studies, okay? Just because Vince made an ass of himself doesn't mean that people who object to Mushnick's horrible points are wrong. Absolutely right. If you object to Mushnick's horrible points, you're right. And if you object to Mushnick's good points, you're wrong. And he's had both. I'll tell you this, anyone who totally defends everything Mushnick does is wrong, and everyone who totally opposes everything Mushnick does is equally as wrong, because he has his good points and his bad points. Let's see, this is from Dave, who goes, "The WF is a fantasy world. Why people take it seriously is beyond me, because it's part of the real world. I think in the end the WF breeds negativity in society. I think that in the end, I don't think the villains are portrayed are always defeated, unless their name is Hunter. The heroes always come on top. Okay, that's the message. Vince was awesome. You guys are so anti-Vince. People active nudity and fornication are part of the WF programs." Did we ever say they were? "I don't think an evil man humiliating and belittling someone is a bad storyline. The storyline deal was to get the audience to hate Vince. Just listen to Ross's commentary. His message is what the WF wanted their audience to feel. People need to lighten up. I side with Vince on the matter because I'm sick of the media looking at this business that we love, looking down on a business that we love. We see it for the art form it is we respect most, and we realize it's just a show. I appreciate and recognize the talent of athletes and entertainers. It's time we stick up for the business. Vince hasn't lost his mind. We have closed our minds." Let's see. On Haku's biography, this has nothing to do with it, anything, but it's really funny. On Haku's biography in the WF website, it says he used to have a legendary tag team with King Tonga. That's a pretty good one. This is someone who goes, "The XFL's getting unfair treatment. I like the league."
He's
CBS
still in
president.
that team.
What?
He's still in that team.
I know. CBS president Les Moonves has gone on record as saying he will implement XFL's innovations in the NFL telecast. Jesse's better suited to be a mouthpiece than a football analyst. The games have gotten better and the broadcasts have gotten better. I've been to 3 games. There's absolutely nothing like it. You feel like you're a fan on the field. Let's go to Jim in New Jersey. We'll start with some phone calls right now since we've got so much emails and everything. Let's go.
Yes, Dave?
Yes.
Hello?
We're here.
Hello, Jim.
Yes, Dave. I first want to start off by saying a long-time listener as well as reader, and I enjoy your work very much.
Thank you very much.
Just a quick question. I've been a big fan of the independent scene here in New Jersey, and I've been looking at a lot of the posts on websites and stuff, and I would like to know your opinion about the possibility of Chris Ford ending up in the WWF.
I don't know. I haven't, I haven't talked with anyone in there. At a different time, I think the possibility would have been pretty good, but I think they're going to be right now of the attitude that they're going to pick and choose and wait to see what happens with WCW, because let's just say they have the opportunity to get a lot of guys from WCW. He may not make that cut.
I just always thought of an idea for him would be, I always, how Raven was always in control of the mentally unstable type of characters. I could picture Raven under the control of Crowbar and Daphne, maybe.
Raven under the control of Crowbar and Daphne. It's different. I don't know. I would say that I don't think
we'll be seeing Daphne in.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Yeah, that one I don't know. Chris Ford we might be seeing. He's a talented guy and he works hard. He's a very likable guy.
And I was impressed lately when he had that hardcore title run. He actually showed that he could speak a little bit also.
Yeah, he did. He did some good. The Remember the best interview he did was the one where Daphne was
with the little
back there, like
behind him, the sparkler.
Oh, it was yeah. And he did the interview with the stuff with Terry Funk was very good. Yeah.
And if you notice, one of the funniest things is that if you've ever met him in person, I've been to a few independent shows in New Jersey. He's a very quiet type of person. Doesn't speak all that well yet. When he has the microphone, he's just a totally different person.
You know, he did this show. God, what was it? February of last year, and he did very well. But he's typical of a lot of the young guys that are in the business. They're really, they grew up as fans. They're really passionate. They'll do anything to get over and to perform. The ones who grew up as fans will do anything to entertain the fans. The ones who grew up not as fans and, kind of see it as just a means to make money, they're the ones who kind of consider the fans marks. I mean, the one good thing, or many good things about current wrestling is that the younger guys, so many of them, they don't have that disdain for the fans that a lot of the previous generation wrestlers had.
Yes,
anything else, Jim?
Yes.
Anything else?
Yes, no, that's basically it. Just wanted to, I'm sorry to get off of the subject of XFL and Vince McMahon. Just been following his career a while. Just wanted to get your opinion.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you very much.
Okay, let's go to Jeff. Jeff, what's up?
Yeah, how you guys doing today?
Hey.
Really good.
About the McMahon interview, Bob Costas had no right interviewing McMahon without watching Raw, without watching a SmackDown from a recent week, and not even paying attention that the Suck It thing hasn't been used in 2 years, and
a year.
And plus now,
but it was used.
Right now their product has been stale and it hasn't been good since like Russo and the rest of the creative team left.
Product got a lot better after Russo left, but that's opinion. That's not fact. But that's my opinion. Is the product got better after Russo left?
Anything else there, Vince?
But I just wanted to tell you what is Costas. Quite frankly, half the what is Costas have the business of going out there and interviewing a guy without watching the product. If you are interviewing, let's say a guy from the show Friends, and you never watch the show Friends, what do you have the right of interviewing the guy about the show?
We don't know what he did and didn't watch. I mean, I would think that you're probably right. I'm relatively sure that he did not sit down and watch a full episode of Raw and a full episode of SmackDown, and you know what? And he should have. I agree with you there. But you don't know how much he did or didn't watch. I mean, it really never came up in the interview. I mean, I think that I do agree with that point though, and I think that one of the things that a lot of people that write about wrestling, it kind of bothers me when people write about wrestling and they don't watch wrestling. Because that always used to bother me. Like, you'd watch like 5 minutes of wrestling and then you write about the whole thing, But again, I don't know what he saw and what he didn't see. But if he didn't watch it, and you're probably right, he should have.
And one more thing, I think the basic concept of the interview, and I've seen a lot of the interviews back in '99 off a lot of networks where they were pounding McMahon about what he was doing, about all the vulgarity, or the neglegating women or whatever, and it seems like an interview from 1999, not an interview from the year 2001. And I think Costas has to really go back.
The Trish thing was a week ago Monday, so it's still it's not a weekly thing. But
the product has definitely calmed down since about like 99.
Absolutely, the product has calmed down. In general, the product has calmed down. Hey, there was a time where I would not have let a kid, under the age of whatever, a young kid watch it. And I would have no problem taking, a kid 11, 12 years old to a SmackDown taping because generally speaking, SmackDown's been a toned down show and I've done it. I don't have a problem with that. But there was a time where I would have. But yeah, it has toned down. And I think maybe one of the problems is that because it has toned down and then they throw something like that on there when you're not expecting because you think it's toned down, it could get a lot, that throws a lot of, then, you know what I mean? It's like you're going like, this is okay to bring my kids to it. It is toned down, and then they do that. So maybe, you know what I mean? And then they do that thing.
I think their problem basically is, they tone it down, then the ratings fall, like they did, I think a couple of weeks ago. It was like in the, I think like SmackDown was like a 3.9, and then
that was the week after. That was the show right after they did the Trish angle. So that's not, you certainly can't blame that angle on toning it down. That was after they ratcheted it up. The rating went down. Now, I'm not saying that there's a correlation. But that is the point.
Yeah, I'm just saying. Let's compare the ratings from when it was really, really bad. You know, like '99. I mean, the product was good, but as far as having a younger audience watch it, it was bad for a younger audience to watch it. But you know, right now, you know, the ratings are certainly not where they were back then. I mean,
no, they're not.
I think,
but there's a lot of reasons. There's a lot of reasons for that. I mean, again, with SmackDown, when they toned SmackDown down, the ratings went up. And when Raw was the raunchier of the show, Raw's ratings went down. But at the peak of the ratings for Raw, which was before there was a SmackDown generally, but the peak of the ratings for Raw was probably when it was at its raunchiest. But, you know, tastes of people change. It goes up and down. You know, the same thing that worked 2 years ago wouldn't work today. That's one of the reasons that they always change.
It's a whole different wrestling environment, too.
Yeah, there's a totally different wrestling environment now that, yeah.
But I've just got a question for you. When Vince Russo was writing the WWF, and then when Vince Russo left, and about December, November, the ratings went down. Do you think anyway that Vince Russo?
They didn't go down right. They didn't go down right away. They did eventually go down.
WCW sure went up when he was up there. They were almost.
No, they didn't. WCW's ratings went way down when he was there.
You sure? How about January?
Nobody studies the ratings probably any closer than I do. The ratings went down when Vince Russo was there both times.
I'll trust you on that, but how about August of August of 2000 when Vince Russo came to WCW? Then with Eric Bischoff,
he came in October 1999, and then the ratings dropped every month.
No, I'm talking about August of. Wait a minute, excuse me.
When he came back, it was like when he came back, they started hitting record low ratings every other week when he came back.
September, August, they started to get the threes, almost up to the fours.
They never came close to it. They haven't been close to a 4 in years.
Did a 3.9. That was it.
What?
That was as high as they got. Was that one quarter did a 3.9?
That was DDP and wasn't that DDP and Buff Bagwell? And wasn't that when Sullivan was?
Angle immediately.
And then they killed the Angle right afterwards. And that was when Sullivan was doing it anyway. And then Flair and Hogan did it like a quarter and they did a 4-4, I think. But that was also under Kevin Sullivan because I think that was on. That was Valentine's Day last year. Because that was the show I was at. Cody, how did you get started? I mean, like, doing a wrestling column in a newspaper, I guess it's around more now. But it's still, the exception as opposed to the norm. And did you have a hard time getting it in? And what about, do you take criticism from regular reporters going like, because when I was a kid, I used to get this, when I was doing regular sports, and they're going like, you'd be a really good reporter if you would quit writing about all that wrestling.
No, I really didn't get that because, I started out as a reporter there at the Morning News. I mean, I've never worked anywhere else, except for the Morning News. I've done a lot of freelancing. I've written for the Sporting News. I've written for, lots of other people. I've written, I've done radio work for ESPN, for Fox, for One-on-One. I mean, I've done, I was a college basketball player, so, it's not like I, don't have, quote unquote real sports experience, or whatever, but it actually started. It wasn't even my idea to do it. I guess it was probably the summer of '98. The WWF hadn't quite taken off to the level that it's at currently, and I really wasn't a WWF fan probably until I went to a live show in February of '98. It was really the first time I got. I obviously watched it when I was a kid. I was really into it when I was a kid, and then I started playing a lot of basketball. And when you're a college basketball player, your life is for the first couple of years I was in college, that's all I did, and so I didn't stick just to watching a whole lot of TV, much less watching wrestling. So I kind of got out of it for a while. But then I think a lot of people my age will say this, when Hogan turned heel, at the Bash at the Beach that year, that's when I got back into it, and I really, really started following it. Rented all the old WrestleManias I'd missed from, when I didn't, when I wasn't following it so closely. But that was back when I was in college, and then we went to my roommate and I went to a show. I guess actually it was in February of '97, WWF show here in Dallas, and we absolutely loved it. And I started following it then. And then I had an idea. We have a section in the newspaper called High Profile every Sunday, and it's a special section in the paper. The Morning News Sunday section is one of the most distributed newspapers all over the country. It's a tremendously well-read Sunday section, and usually this High Profile section is reserved for Mark Cuban was in it recently. Jerry Jones has been in it. Ross Perot. all those are obviously figures here in Dallas. And George W. Bush was in it right after he was named president, but was elected president. But anyway, I knew the editor of that section, and I told her, I said, listen, I've got a wild, off-the-wall idea for you, but, I really think it would work and spice up your section. And I did a lot of research on it, and I suggested that we do a story on Stone Cold, a high profile on Steve. He was from Edna, Texas, which, it's a long ways from here, but he had played football at North Texas, which is right north of Dallas, and actually got his start here, in Dallas with Fritz and down Sportorium. So we decided that we would. She said, "Yeah, let's go for it. Let's do it." So I did. I made a couple of trips with him, and we did the story. It ended up being about 4,000 words long, and it was a tremendously well-read section. That's a section that normally most people read. Older people while they're sipping lemonade, sitting on the porch on Sunday mornings, and this just caused a shock in Dallas that we ran this in the high profile section, but it was extremely well read, and actually it was the first mainstream extended piece ever done on Steve. It actually came out right before the Rolling Stone piece did on him, and so it was really the first one that anybody had ever done on him. And from there, our pro football writer had gotten with me and said, listen, you need to start writing a wrestling comic. I said, I'm not a wrestling fan at all. He said, but it's tremendously big, and everywhere I go, somebody's talking about it. My kids are into it. He said, we got to get it going. And one thing led to another, and with his backing, we got it rolling. And we didn't think it's going to be as popular as what it was, but it's caught on, and I think it's pretty well received all over. And I get great cooperation from all the promotions, and it's been a big success. But it's a long story. I know it's a long story, but that's pretty much how I got started, and how we started writing it. And and now I get a lot of looks around the newsroom. I'm not there just a whole lot, but people say, hey, you still cover wrestling? Well, yeah, still doing wrestling.
Yeah, it's in the paper every week.
You still do basketball? You still do football? And I do. I mean, I just got through writing a college basketball book, that we put out on Sunday night. So yeah, I still do that, but obviously, wrestling's what I like to do, and that's what I'm going to continue doing.
Okay, I want to make a real quick mention of this, and we're going to go back to the phone calls. This was our poll for today. What was the best Raw match this year? Steve Austin versus Kurt Angle, 33%. Rock versus Kurt Angle from Monday, 36%, which in fact won. Interesting, Brian, that one won.
That's a good match.
That's a hell of a match. Eddie Guerrero against Chris Benoit, 25%, and Rock and Austin against Benoit and Angle, which was from a week ago or so, 6%. Today's question, how do you think Vince came off on the record? A, very good, B, good, C, bad, D, very bad, E, we didn't see the show, but also didn't see or hear the show because we got the show. Let me go through this real quick. Pride, final lineup, Kazushi Sakuraba against Vanderlei Silva, Igor Vovchanchin against Ken Shamrock. That is certainly a question mark, that match. And hopefully we'll know more about that maybe tomorrow or Monday. Mark Coleman against Alon Goez, Renzo Gracie and Dan Henderson. Heath Herring against Denis Sobolov, who I don't know anything about other than he's competed in a couple of Russian tournaments. Guy Metzger against Egan Inoue, Vitor Belfort against Bobby Southworth. Vitor Belfort's back. And then the match we talked about earlier, Masaki Satake against Tadao Yasuda. A correction from the website, Viewers' Choice Canada, was originally going to air this on April the 13th. It's actually going to be on April the 20th, but it will air on April the 6th on pay-per-view in the United States if you got DirecTV. And let me go through this. This is from Ray, spelled R-E-Y, which I think means his real name is Oscar. Not really. Vince makes it extremely hard for anyone to defend him. As a fan of wrestling, what can you say to a naysayer after if they would watch that excerpt? It's from Mike, who says, it seems like nearly all of Costas' points were taken directly from Phil Mushnick columns, which didn't bode well for his preparedness, judging from Mushnick's knowledge of wrestling, gleaned from his Observer Live appearances, and that seemed to hurt Bob. But what hurt Vince was not the facts, but that Vince screwed Vince. People have been waiting to say that one, huh? Let's go to Edward in Texas. Edward, what's up?
I had read on the net that Nova was supposed to receive a tryout match at SmackDown, but he had missed it.
Don't know.
Transportation problems.
Oh, is that true? Okay.
If that is the case, is that going to affect him negatively in the future in getting another tryout match?
Depends on if they believe him. It shouldn't.
Uh-huh. Do you guys think that he would fit in the WWF right now?
You know what? It's a tough
I would say developmental deal.
Yeah, it's a tough fit. He's going to be doing the show, by the way, Nova, I believe.
We're trying to get him.
Yep. Anything else, Ed?
Oh, yeah. Okay, I also wanted to recommend a tape for you guys. If you haven't had a chance to see the Beyond the Mat with the 30 minutes of additional footage yet.
You know, I've got that here, but I don't have a DVD player. I'm, like, out of touch. Okay. But tell us about the 30 minutes extra, because obviously we've all seen the movie.
Yeah, it's great. It's totally hilarious. There's a scene with Terry Funk where he's, like, at a bar playing cards with some guys, and out of the background you see, like, a couple dancing, and they hit him in the head. And he turns around and he tells the guy that if they keep messing with his head that he's going to mess them up. And they show the couple, and it's this big, gay, drunk cowboy and this little drunk, gay Asian man. And it's so hilarious because Funk's all like, the friends are trying to calm him down, and Funk's all, no, I'm going to mess y'all up. You keep messing with me. And they're just trying, like, antagonizing him. It was totally hilarious. And then there's a story with Appa, where he's telling a story where his eye was popped out of his head, and that he had to put his eye back in his head. And then when he let go, there was, like, some hair that was behind the eyeball. And
it popped out of his head, and he put it back?
Yeah, he said that it was hanging out of his head.
Hanging by, like, a ligament?
That's what it sounded like when he was telling the story. And that he covered it. He put his hand over his head, and it ended up being that when he let go, there was some hair behind the eyeball, and he had to cover the eyeball and pull the hair out. and the way he said it felt like he goes, let me tell you, it tickled. And then after he gets he pulls it out and everything, it's fine. Then he goes now Jake the Snake and his partner, now they start to make us mad.
Huh. Oh. Yeah.
And
you put your eyeball in backwards, can you see your brain?
I'm sorry?
I was just wondering about Off's eyeball.
Is that a different Beyond the Mat than the documentary version that includes the extra footage of Foley watching the tape? Or I don't know what you're talking about.
This is a newer one. This had it was 30 minutes after the movie.
The DVD.
Well, I have the DVD that has extra footage on it, but I've never seen any of that.
No, this is a new one. It's like it'll say on the box that it has 30 minutes after the movie.
A videotape or a DVD?
It's a videotape.
Okay.
And then they have the entire speech that Paulie gave to the ECW crew before the pay-per-view. And that was real good. That was real intense.
I've heard those speeches before.
And then they show a little of the backstage
they are good,
from
by the
the
way.
wrestling show in Kearney, Nebraska.
With Jake at the...
I'm sorry?
The indie show, yeah.
They have to call a gym and try and get a girl to come in because one of the girls didn't show up, and they show their match and everything.
That's good.
Oh yeah, that's. Anyone know a girl in this town?
The girl she had a fight. It was hilarious because she was like a female version of Dennis Stamp. She was totally delusional. It was so hilarious.
Dennis Stamp was great in that movie, though.
Yeah. You guys should try and get him on the show. I bet he would be hilarious.
That'd be a hell of a show.
You know what? He would be hilarious. And you know what? I could actually find him.
He's probably mad we haven't invited him to the show yet.
Dennis Stamp did have Bret Hart's first match. Nobody cares. But that's true. When Bret Hart was 16 years old.
Wow.
Oh, speaking of Bret Hart, let me ask, I could have swore long time ago, was Bret Hart, when he first started with the WWF, a jobber?
Kinda.
Because I remember him being
not like a total jobber, but yeah, kinda.
Okay, well, that's pretty much all I had, guys.
Okay, cool.
Thanks for taking my call.
X-Pac and Justin just started doing the crotch chop. Costas got lucky, but he was right. Okay, this says the part of the interview that I hate is after he showed the clip of the Trish angle, and Bob goes, what possible explanation can you give for that? Like he just got done showing a Holocaust clip of the assassination of JFK. Okay.
My favorite part of the interview was when Vince says 3 times in a row, will you let me speak? And then Costas finally goes, okay, go ahead. And so Vince takes this long sip of coffee.
Mm-hmm.
Classic.
Let's see. It goes, even though I don't agree with you guys, I'm glad there's a forum like this for wrestling fans. I have to disagree with you about Bob Costas. I'm a fan of his, but even I thought his statements were off base. Bob not only made mistakes about the tape trial and the XFL not having a pregame show. Okay, the XFL did have a pregame show. It was a locally produced show. It wasn't produced by Vince. It was the Opie and Anthony thing. But he wasn't wrong that they had the show. But he was wrong about. But that's something that we'll actually have on tomorrow's show. Okay, he did make a mistake on the tape trial as far as it still being on. That's true. That's a valid point. He basically recycled media statements toward Vince and the WF and used them in his interviews. The fact that he asked Vince whether or not he would fix the games for ratings was foolish. No, it's not, because he fixes wrestling matches for business. It's not foolish at all. Most of the business people in New York were under the assumption, until they kept insisting that it wasn't the case, that he would attempt to fix the games. And there have been fixed football games in the NFL, and everyone knows it. I mean, it's like when one guy owns the whole league, there is that possibility you can, and there's different ways of doing it. It's not a stupid question. The fact is the games are not fixed. I think with NBC as a partner, remember when NBC became a partner, I said that because of the NBC involvement, there's really no way that they could get away with it. But I mean, we live in like we talked about with the Pride, with boxing, fixes happen. It's a lot harder in a team sport than a one-on-one sport. But people have told me many times in football that if you got the quarterback and you get a coach, you don't need anyone else. You can fix a game. So it can be done. The editing job of the Trish-Vince angle was so stupid on HBO's part, and McMahon was right about the smear campaign. What do you expect? I mean, I didn't see the visual.
Why was that bad? What was it?
I don't know. Costas did not have the facts on both the XFL and WWF, and he basically told Vince to his face that what he did for a living was low rent. Did he say that? There was a sort of an insinuation there, but he didn't quite say that. Costas put down Vince McMahon by saying that NBC shouldn't have ruined their prestige by associating themselves with him. That's true. And I kind of agree with that myself. And I think that probably most people in NBC agree with that right now. It's a shame the media has no clue whatsoever about the wrestling business. That's valid. Absolutely. I think it's a shame, too. They continue to look down on wrestling as an art form, and they look down on everyone who loves wrestling. Some do, some don't. But more do than should. Bob was the voice
Cody,
of the critics.
do you look down at people who like wrestling?
Well, I better not.
Okay.
I'd be looking down at the fans of my column. I know. I wouldn't say that I do. I mean, I can't say that a lot of my colleagues don't, but no, I obviously don't.
Okay.
You know, one point, and we actually something I brought up earlier, and Brian, you know this from being around veteran wrestlers, is that most veteran wrestlers look down on wrestling fans every bit as much as the people who criticize wrestling. Maybe more. And it's a lot of, and I would say until, I wouldn't even qualify this. I would say that almost every wrestling promoter I've ever dealt with very few exceptions, looks down on wrestling fans like you wouldn't believe. They have no respect for them.
Yeah. You were right, though, earlier about younger wrestlers. They don't
younger
have
wrestlers
that
are different.
But older guys that have been around, even as early as late 80s, early 90s.
Oh, the late 80s guys completely.
Oh, yeah.
And the early 90s guys completely. It's only the guys who I would say came along after talking about wrestling in this open and honest manner was prevalent, and they grew up with this, mid-90s, and they grew up with this, or some of the older guys from the late 80s and early 90s who grew up with like that Observer or Torch environment, and were like subscribers, so it was part of their thing to accept wrestling for what it is and not be ashamed of wrestling. But the ones who came from the other direction, or not from that, and came and basically were trained by old wrestlers, with all the carny bullshit, those people, I mean, they totally look down on the fans. Mm-hmm. Every bit as much as the whole, it's like it's a shame, it's like it scares them that they can vote and the whole bit. Actually, it scares me some of them can vote, but not all of them.
Hey, it scares me a lot of NFL fans can vote if you want to go that route. I don't think that when you talk about that aspect, that's not much different than an NBA player or Major League Baseball player, NFL, NHL, whatever. I deal with those guys, on a daily basis, and
baseball players look down on fans too.
Less about fans.
Baseball players totally look down on fans. I know.
Pay me my $25 million, and I'm out of here. Alex Rodriguez didn't like that, but I mean he's getting the $25 million. But a lot of players here are like that. And it's not just players here, but it's players all over. In general, you get a lot of athletes who are like that.
I used to one of the things that I used to hate was, and this would be in the 90s when I would deal with the media and they would be running down wrestling fans, and I would say this is when I had a lot more free time and I went to a lot of football, and football fans lived and died with the home team winning more than wrestling fans did with the babyface winning. I mean, wrestling fans would be really, really mad in that era when the babyface lost, don't get me wrong, but there was nothing like football fans in this area after the 49ers would lose. I mean, it's not even on that level. And then I would go hey, these people, the football fans are the ones that, to me, are nuts because it's not their real life either.
Yeah.
Let's see. Do you think Mushnick watches much wrestling a week? Not a whole hell of a lot, but he does watch it. Why didn't Costas grill Bobby Knight? I didn't see Bobby Knight. I got no idea. I think after Vince, Bobby Knight was like a pleasure, probably.
Like I said, Bobby Knight was laid back compared to Vince.
Yeah. Let's see.
And I'm about to have to deal with Bobby Knight, so I'll be able to tell you who's better to deal with.
Let's see. Have you ever noticed how all the people who defend Russo have Brooklyn accents? Actually, we got like 5 of these in a row.
I keep thinking it's Vince Russo calling.
Yeah. Isn't it likely that Vince McMahon's comment about Jesse Ventura being on thin ice with respect to the XFL announcing is a calculated attempt to raise interest in the XFL? Partially. Isn't it possible Vince is just taking the initiative in creating a Vince versus Ventura angle that could draw interest in the product? He just tried that with Tillman, and that was a big failure. Let's see. In my personal view, Bob Costa showed how good he really is last night. He earned my respect by staying cool under the pressure. Vince actually hulked up and turned into his wrestling persona. One, do you think Triple H's influence on Vince is because he isn't married and was dating his daughter behind the scenes? Triple H's influence is because he's a really, really smart guy, and I don't mean that in a sarcastic way. He's an awesome performer, and he's got a great head for the business, and they listen to him. But because of that, he's really clever.
Yeah.
Let's see. Let's go to John in Florida. John, what's up?
Hey, Dave, what's up?
Not too much.
Hey, I heard on the internet that WrestleBoard confirmed the sale today.
I have heard both sides. Okay, you know what I'm going to do? Because I actually, during one of the breaks, I was listening to my messages, and there was probably 7 messages from people in WCW, but nobody said other than call me back. So I've got a feeling that there's news, and as soon as the show's over, I'm going to start returning calls, and I'll do something on the website. As soon as I know for sure, it would not, put this way, that news would not surprise me. I certainly heard that yesterday, but I don't want to say 100% because I certainly heard the opposite yesterday as well.
And I also heard that Kurt Hennig had a fight with Steven Seagal and brought him to his knees. Did you hear anything about that?
Was there a Kurt Hennig?
I think there was a confrontation.
There was stories about that, but I don't remember what the story was.
It was quite a while ago.
Yeah.
All right, Dave, thanks.
Okay. Let's see. This is very annoying. Vince had some fairly good points at times, but man, what a jerk. He lost control after the first 10 seconds. I think that the WWF should hire someone as a spokesperson and keep Vince the hell away from the media. Let's go to John in California. John, what's up?
Dave, Brian, Cody, how you doing?
Hey.
When you said veteran wrestlers looking down on us fans, Dave, are you talking like Ric Flair veterans or, let's say, Steve Austin veterans? Or both?
I can't say Steve Austin. I don't know Steve Austin well. What I know of Steve Austin,
you mean those people in particular, or those?
No, I'm just in terms of.
Oh! People from those eras. People from both of those eras. But I would say, in the case of both of those people you're talking about, I would say, Flair's going to have some of it because of the environment he grew up in, but it's not that bad as compared to most of the guys from that environment. Flair grew up as a big wrestling fan from childhood, and the guys who grow up as fans generally don't have that, but Flair is a product of his environment and probably has a little of it, just because of that thing. I've never noticed it with Austin, but people who broke in the mid-'80s, a lot in the territorial system, a lot of them, more yes than no.
Okay. Based on what we saw last night, how much of the real Vince McMahon did we see?
Nobody knows the real Vince McMahon except for maybe Linda does. I don't know.
I don't know if Vince does.
I don't know that, remember Lawler, what he said the other day? I thought I knew Vince McMahon. I realized I didn't know him at all.
Right. That was Lawler's mistake right there.
Because I knew he would blow up a little. I just didn't know, how far. Because he always does this on these mainstream media shows. That's just my opinion. Why do you think the WWF protects Howard Finkel so well, to where he doesn't do interviews?
What do you mean?
I
think nobody asked for him to do interviews.
Who would ask for Howard Finkel? No offense to Howard Finkel, but
yeah.
Have you tried to get?
And you know what else? The WWF has people who they want to market, and Howard Finkel isn't one of them. They're not going out there There was a time, I'll just tell you a story, and this is an old story, but there was a local TV, KTVU, used to carry the WWF here. It was very popular, so they wanted to do a 2-hour special on the WWF. And the guy who was producing the piece was a real big fan of Owen Hart's and wanted to do a feature on, and Owen Hart had just broken in there as the Blue Blazer. So he wanted to do a big feature on the Blue Blazer. And the WWF, even though it was their own station and it was going to be totally positive, just said that, the Blue Blazer is not on the list of people that we are pushing right now, so you can't do this. And that's just how they are. I mean, Howard Finkel will never be on their list of people that they're marketing. I don't know. I've never heard of a media person going I want to do an interview with Howard Finkel, that they would give an interview to, say, off the record or someone that they normally deal with.
Have you tried to get him?
Have I?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm not allowed to get people from the WWF. That's just the deal. If I was, you know what? If I was, I would love to get Howard Finkel. Howard Finkel has a great knowledge of professional wrestling, more than probably, if someone was going to write a book, Howard Finkel, if he actually said what he knew, probably knows more than almost anyone. I am sure of that. He knows, and he doesn't make mistakes, and he loves wrestling, and he's a good guy. Even though they make fun of him and all that, but, that guy, I'll bet you that guy has some stories. Like giving blood for Hulk Hogan.
Are you still out of San Jose, Dave?
Yes, I am.
Just wondering why. Why Northern California? It's just where I grew up.
Earthquake.
It's where I grew up. That's the only reason.
Excellent. Well, we appreciate you up there. And how could you not have a DVD player?
I just haven't gotten around to buying one. Believe me, I'll probably have one within 2 months.
Okay. Great show, guys. Take care.
Thank you very much. Is it Lewis in Arizona?
Yep. Lewis in Arizona.
Hey, Lewis, how
that copy of Beyond the Mat that guy was talking about earlier, it's actually a VHS only copy.
Really?
That you can get. It has a gold border.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it has the extra 30 minutes, and the best part of the 30 minutes is Jake Roberts going into a bathroom, and he sees a bunch of guys praying, and he just goes ahead and goes to one of the urinals and does his business.
Dave, can I tell you a Jake Roberts story?
Yeah.
This is the first time I'd ever interviewed Jake. It was before the Heroes of Wrestling pay-per-view that we all remember so well. And,
that was a good one.
Oh Lord.
Yeah, exactly. That was a great interview. This is probably you guys remember when it was, but one of their PR people called me and said, "Hey, Jake lives in the area. He's going to be down in Dallas. Can you do an interview with him?" I said, "Okay, all right, I'll do it." He says, "Where do you want me to meet him?" So we set it up, and I show up, and Jake was late. It wasn't his fault. He was actually doing another appearance, and so that wasn't his fault. Well, he says, "Well, just come on up to the hotel room, to my room, and we'll do this interview." I said, "Okay, we'll do it." So we go up to the hotel room, and we're sitting there, and he just starts talking. I didn't even ask a question, and he just starts talking. I bet we talked for an hour. And I probably said 2 or 3 minutes worth of words. And about that time, the phone rings in his room, and he answers it, and he says, "Hey brother, hold on a second. Can you? I got to do this interview from DC. Can you hold on?" I said, "Sure, I'll do it." Well, that was the morning that Gorilla Monsoon had died, and I guess the guy that was doing the interview told Jake, said, Gorilla Monsoon has died. What kind of memories do you have about him? Whatever. And he told the guy on the interview line, he says, "Hold on a second." He says, "This has got me shaken up. I'm gonna have to call you back." So he hangs up and he looks at me and he goes, "Can you give me a second?" I said, "Okay." And goes to the bathroom and he's there for a while, and he comes back out and and he kind of looked real disheveled, and I said, "Do we need to do this later? Are you okay?" And he says, "No, this news just got me really shaken up." Well, we do our interview, do whatever, and I was telling some people about this later, and a WWF person said, that doesn't surprise me about that, but did Jake even really know Gorilla Monsoon?
When someone asked about the real Vince McMahon, the other one, I don't think anyone knows the real Jake Roberts either.
I just thought that was such an interesting story, and and we're sitting there, and the whole time I was an athlete in college. I'm still a pretty big guy. He's trying to get me to come to his wrestling school and start wrestling. I said, I can't do that anymore. I'm the head of a company now. I run my own publishing company. No. You come up to come up to Gainesville, we'll get you started. Oh, it'd be great,
Oh, God.
I'm the whole time thinking, Jake, I'm trying to do an interview with you here, man. I want stuff from you. I'm asking you questions. I'm not the one being interviewed here.
Oh,
my God.
The other thing I had to say was, I live in Tucson, Arizona, and wrestling here isn't very big, even though I'm a huge fan. But I was watching, this proves the point that Ric Flair can draw outside of the Carolinas. I was watching the news, and recently U of A beat Stanford last week in a big game. Stanford was #1. And the guy started off the segment by saying, Ric Flair, my favorite wrestler, put it the best way. To be the man, you got to beat the man. And then went into the whole about U of A beating Stanford. So I just figured I'd drop that in because, Ric Flair can't draw outside the Carolinas.
And he's a big college fan.
Well, you know what?
Big
Ric Flair,
fan.
seriously, right now, Ric Flair can't draw anywhere, but it's not
yeah,
really, but it's not really his fault.
If he was booked as the legend that he's supposed to be and as a baby face and as an attraction feature, he
Yep,
makes
I know.
money.
I know, and we've said it for how many years, and it's
Yeah,
like one
well,
of those things.
nobody wants to boo Ric Flair. I mean, he can go out there and be a parody of himself and be, half a madman, but nobody likes that. Nobody wants to see that.
Nobody wants to pay to boo Ric Flair. Nope, you're right. They want
they want to see Ric Flair in $1,000 suits walking out there saying woo, talking about how he kissed all the girls, talking about how he's putting over, whatever he's putting over at that time. He needs to be stuck with somebody young like Mike Sanders.
They don't want to hear that.
Stick him with a Mike Sanders and just have him play.
Yeah, I totally agree with you.
And they just won't even let him play. They'd rather let him be a shadow of his old self. It's like watching the Hulk Hogan interviews from last year when he was back in the red and yellow.
Oh, when he was red and yellow?
Yeah.
Oh.
That was so horrible. I mean, it was just like a parody of Hulk Hogan by Hulk Hogan. It was something I would expect to see on Saturday Night Live.
It was good for 1 week because as a parody, but after that it was just so sad.
Well, yeah, I remember the pop the first week, and I was just like, okay, these people, want to see the red and yellow one more time. But then when it went on the next week, I had no clue. And then he started doing all those pre-taped interviews.
And then he did the black and white, and he was like changing his persona every week.
Oh,
remember that when he was?
It's just like, what the hell is this guy doing?
Remember when he tried to be Steve Austin for that period?
Oh yeah, when he changed back into just like the jeans and the black shirt. That's when he put over Billy Kidman.
When he was doing the Terry Bollea and when he was doing the FUNB. And all that.
Yeah. When he was putting over Billy Kidman.
Oh God! Oh, someday I'm gonna read back on those observers for the last 2 years on the WCW section, and I'm gonna go, oh my God!
I'm gonna look at those, Dave, and go, how in the world did you write those?
Okay, we are totally out of time right now. I want to thank everyone for calling in, sending in emails, and we will be back tomorrow at 5.